Have you ever imagined thousands of Iranian students quietly packing their lives into suitcases and leaving their homeland, only to arrive in the most unexpected of places, the Philippines? Why would they choose a nation often overlooked by the global education giants? Could there be something hidden here? Something powerful yet subtle? Something quietly profound that draws them halfway across the world? Picture this. It was a typical humid evening at Ninoy Aquino International Airport in Manila. Thousands pass through this bustling terminal every day: business travelers, tourists eager for tropical beaches, Filipino families welcoming loved ones. But this evening, amid the usual chaos, a quiet scene unfolded. A man stood alone near the arrival gate, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit that bore the marks of travel fatigue. He looked ordinary, yet distinctly out of place. He wasn't scanning for luggage or anxiously checking his watch. He simply stood there, silently weeping, the tears catching the pale glow of the airport lights. Passers-by glanced quickly and moved on, yet no one seemed to notice the depth of the story behind those quiet tears. That man was Dr. Amir, a respected Iranian professor who had taught at prestigious universities across Europe and the Middle East. Yet here he was, alone and emotional, thousands of miles away from home, carrying a silent weight. What could drive a man like him, esteemed, accomplished, and admired, to break down silently in a Manila airport? Dr. Amir's arrival was just the beginning. Soon, behind him, hundreds and eventually thousands of young Iranian students started trickling into the country, each arriving quietly, without fanfare or celebration. Their presence wasn't announced in flashy headlines. There were no diplomatic press releases or international news alerts. They simply arrived, enrolled quietly into Filipino universities, and tried to blend into their new surroundings. But why? What was it about the Philippines that quietly drew them here? At first glance, it seems improbable, almost paradoxical. After all, the Philippines is better known internationally for its sunny beaches, welcoming people, and vibrant festivals, not as a magnet for Iranian academics. Yet beneath the surface, a profound reason was quietly unfolding. Imagine leaving your home country behind, a place you love deeply, yet must leave quietly, almost unnoticed. You carry with you only your dreams, fears, and hopes for a future that seems uncertain. You arrive in a foreign land, stepping onto unfamiliar soil, your senses overwhelmed by new sights, sounds, and sensations. You stand amidst an entirely different culture, language, and way of life, not knowing what lies ahead. This was exactly what thousands of young Iranian students experienced as they stepped onto Filipino soil, their future uncertain, yet filled with quiet hope. When Dr. Amir arrived, the Philippines was not his first choice. It wasn't even his second. Yet something quietly shifted when he first met a Filipino immigration officer at the airport. The officer looked at his passport, raised his eyes, and with a gentle smile, softly said, "Welcome home." Those two words, said casually but sincerely, were enough to shake Amir deeply. Here was someone who didn't know him, who had no reason to welcome him beyond simple human kindness. Amir had taught about humanity and kindness for decades, yet in that brief moment, he felt its real power for perhaps the first time. Days passed, and Amir quietly began helping Iranian students settle into their new lives. He witnessed moments of confusion, homesickness, and even fear. But he also saw something remarkable, a quiet resilience emerging among these young students. They began exploring Filipino streets, markets, and universities with curiosity and openness. Amir watched quietly from afar as his students formed friendships with Filipino classmates, experiencing genuine warmth and hospitality they had seldom known in such abundance. As Amir moved quietly through Manila's vibrant streets and bustling neighborhoods, he started noticing little things, powerful things that often go unnoticed. It was the genuine smiles of strangers, the openness of people eager to help without expectation, the peaceful coexistence of diverse religions and cultures, all subtly influencing his understanding of what it means to live and learn freely. But what exactly were these students leaving behind in Iran? What quietly compelled them to choose a country thousands of miles away from home, seemingly disconnected from their own history and culture? In that quiet airport scene, Amir's tears weren't simply about his own journey. They held deeper meaning, reflecting sadness, relief, hope, and a powerful, quiet gratitude for finding unexpected solace. His emotional arrival hinted at the hidden struggles faced by many Iranians, struggles often whispered rather than shouted, quietly endured rather than openly discussed. As Amir stood there in the airport, quietly crying in gratitude and relief, thousands more Iranian students were silently preparing to leave behind everything familiar. The Philippines, unexpectedly, would soon become their safe haven. But what lay ahead was more profound than anyone, including Amir, could have anticipated. Their arrival was just the beginning of a quiet revolution, one driven not by force or loud proclamations, but by human connection, quiet courage, and the silent power of kindness. What Amir and these students didn't yet fully realize was how much their quiet journey to the Philippines would transform their lives, and perhaps even yours. Dr. Amir had spent his entire life immersed in academia. His world was neatly organized, built around predictable routines, lectures in prestigious lecture halls, carefully worded publications, and international conferences filled with polite applause. Back in Tehran, he was revered as a visionary educator who had mentored countless students into successful careers. Yet, here in the bustling heart of Manila, Amir found himself suddenly disoriented, swept away by an entirely different rhythm. In those early days in Manila, Amir's expectations were modest, shaped by his practical mindset. He anticipated bureaucracy, language barriers, cultural confusion, typical challenges of relocation. His primary hope was simple: to settle his students comfortably into their studies, ensuring minimal disruption to their academic journey. Yet what he experienced went far beyond mere practical adjustments. It was deeply personal, quietly transformative, and powerfully emotional. One humid afternoon, Amir found himself sitting alone at a crowded university cafeteria. The chatter of excited students echoed around him, Tagalog mixing fluidly with English, laughter filling the spaces between conversations. As he quietly observed, Amir noticed something remarkable, a scene that struck him unexpectedly. At a nearby table, a group of Filipino students warmly welcomed an Iranian girl named Mina. She was shy, hesitant with her broken English, visibly nervous. Yet her Filipino classmates patiently listened, nodding encouragingly, responding gently, and making every effort to make her feel at home. Amir watched as Mina gradually relaxed, her tense shoulders softening, a hesitant smile slowly appearing on her face. It was a small moment, yet deeply moving, ordinary kindness in its purest form. Amir felt an unfamiliar emotion stirring inside him. It wasn't pride or even relief. It was a quiet awe at witnessing genuine compassion from strangers who knew nothing about Mina beyond her name. Days later, Amir experienced another unexpected moment. He had taken a walk through a crowded Manila market, a vibrant tapestry of colors, sounds, and smells. As he stopped at a small stall to buy fresh mangoes, he fumbled awkwardly with unfamiliar Filipino pesos. The elderly vendor smiled patiently and quietly guided Amir through counting the currency, refusing to rush despite a line of waiting customers behind him. After the transaction, Amir tried apologizing for taking so long, but the vendor simply shook her head gently and placed a small extra mango into his hand. "For you, my friend," she said softly. "Welcome to the Philippines." Amir felt his throat tighten. He had traveled the world, experienced countless acts of professional courtesy and diplomatic hospitality, but this humble gesture, a simple extra mango, touched something deeper. This wasn't just kindness. It was a quiet reassurance, a gentle message that even here, far from home, he was valued and welcomed not as a stranger, but as a friend. Amir found himself silently moved, reflecting deeply on how this brief interaction challenged everything he thought he understood about generosity and human connection. Yet perhaps Amir's most profound moment happened unexpectedly during a quiet Sunday morning. Curious about the Philippines' diverse religious landscape, Amir accepted an invitation from a fellow professor to visit a modest local church. He sat quietly at the back, observing respectfully as families filled the pews. Children giggled quietly as elders prayed earnestly. Though Amir was not religious himself, he appreciated the serenity of shared spiritual expression. Near the end of the service, the congregation rose, singing a simple, heartfelt hymn. Amir could not understand the Tagalog words, but he felt their warmth, their sincerity resonating deeply within him. Suddenly, a gentle hand rested softly on his shoulder. Turning slightly, Amir saw an elderly Filipino woman smiling quietly at him, her eyes full of gentle understanding. She whispered softly, almost inaudibly, "Peace be with you." Those 4 simple words echoed powerfully inside Amir. They were spoken quietly, yet carried profound weight. It was an invitation, simple yet powerful, to let go of his worries, fears, and doubts, if only for that moment. It felt strangely comforting. Amir was accustomed to complexities, intellectual debates, and scholarly rigor, yet here, within this humble church, he found something uniquely powerful. A quiet strength derived not from academic excellence or intellectual prowess, but from genuine, heartfelt human connection. In that quiet, fleeting moment, Amir experienced a profound shift within himself. He recognized that his understanding of success, education, and even happiness had been quietly, yet irreversibly, challenged. It was not the prestige of institutions or the rigor of research that defined true education. It was the quiet lessons of empathy, acceptance, and compassion he'd witnessed among these ordinary Filipinos. That day, Amir left the church silently reflective. The vibrant Manila streets now felt different, warmer somehow. He began noticing small moments everywhere: the kindness of a street vendor gently helping an elderly customer, a taxi driver patiently guiding a confused tourist, neighbors casually sharing food with one another. Each small gesture became significant, powerful in its simplicity. These small moments weren't dramatic. They didn't announce themselves with grandeur. Yet each quietly taught Amir something crucial about life, humanity, and connection. Lessons he had overlooked amid the hectic pace of his previous life. Walking slowly back to his small apartment, Amir felt a quiet calmness settle within him. He understood now why those thousands of Iranian students had chosen this unlikely country. It wasn't merely practical reasons or convenient visas. It was the subtle yet powerful promise of genuine humanity that silently drew them here. He thought back to his first night at the airport, the silent tears, the quiet uncertainty, and now realized he was no longer the same man who had arrived confused and emotionally overwhelmed. Something profound had shifted quietly within him. Amir stood in the bright sunlight of a Filipino afternoon, finally beginning to understand what true transformation felt like, and quietly wondered what more powerful lessons awaited him. Weeks turned into months, and slowly, quietly, Manila began to feel like home, not just for Amir, but for thousands of Iranian students scattered across the archipelago. Their transition wasn't without struggles, but the quiet strength of the Filipino community carried them through. Amir, once skeptical and practical, had come to deeply respect and appreciate this quiet resilience, this understated kindness embedded so naturally in the Filipino spirit. But the moment Amir realized how much he had truly changed occurred on a quiet evening during a modest gathering organized by the Iranian students. They wanted to thank their Filipino hosts and friends who had embraced them warmly, gently, without hesitation. The event was simple. No fancy halls or formal speeches, just a humble community center filled with laughter, shared stories, and quiet moments of connection. As Amir stood at the back, watching quietly, he noticed Mina, the same shy student he'd seen struggling during her first days, now confidently chatting in fluent English, and even a bit of Tagalog, laughing with her Filipino friends. He felt pride swell quietly inside him, recognizing her transformation as a mirror of his own. Then, unexpectedly, Amir was asked to speak. He hesitated briefly, feeling the quiet weight of responsibility, knowing his words needed to match the quiet strength he'd witnessed every day in this extraordinary country. Standing in front of the small, diverse crowd, Amir took a deep breath, his voice quiet but steady, filled with sincerity he'd seldom felt before. "When we first came here," he began softly, "we were uncertain. Some of us feared rejection, misunderstanding, or loneliness. Yet, from our very first moments here, we were met not only with kindness but with something deeper, something quietly powerful, a humanity that transcended borders, cultures, and languages." The room fell into a gentle silence, each person reflecting deeply on Amir's heartfelt words. "Back home," Amir continued softly, "I taught my students about resilience, strength, and the importance of building a future. Yet it was here, in the Philippines, a country many outsiders underestimate, that I truly understood these lessons. It wasn't from lectures or textbooks, but through quiet acts of compassion, a stranger's welcome, a vendor's gentle patience, the quiet prayers of acceptance and peace." Amir's voice cracked slightly with emotion, but he continued firmly, passionately. "You've shown us a strength I never knew existed, a quiet yet unstoppable force rooted in kindness. You welcomed thousands of strangers without fanfare or noise, offering friendship without conditions. And through that quiet generosity, you've taught us the true meaning of home." Tears glistened softly in the eyes of both Iranians and Filipinos alike. For Amir, it was a moment of profound clarity. His entire academic career had been about educating minds, but in that quiet room, he realized his true mission had shifted, to nurture hearts, inspired by the humble lessons learned here in the Philippines. Later that evening, Amir stood quietly outside the community center, looking up at the calm night sky dotted with stars. A Filipino friend quietly approached and stood beside him, gently breaking the silence. "Did you ever imagine you would feel this way when you first arrived here?" she asked softly. Amir smiled quietly, shaking his head, emotion evident in his voice. "I thought we came here out of necessity, a practical decision. But now I realize we came here for something far more important. We found humanity. We found ourselves." She nodded gently, her eyes soft with understanding. "That's what this country has always been, a quiet sanctuary for those who seek it. Sometimes even we Filipinos forget that." Amir reflected deeply on her words, realizing that perhaps his story was part of something bigger, something quietly powerful, a gentle reminder not just to outsiders, but to the Filipino people themselves of their extraordinary gift. In the months and years that followed, Amir stayed on, quietly dedicating himself to building bridges between Iran and the Philippines. He became not just an educator, but an ambassador of quiet strength, compassion, and understanding. His students, inspired deeply by their experiences, grew into leaders who carried this gentle philosophy of kindness back into their communities worldwide. Today, whenever Amir is asked why thousands of Iranian students quietly chose the Philippines, he smiles gently, his eyes filled with gratitude, and answers simply, "They didn't just choose the Philippines chose them." And in doing so, it quietly reminded the world of the extraordinary power of kindness. And perhaps that is the quiet strength of the Philippines, a nation that quietly changes lives, that gently opens hearts, and powerfully teaches the world a profound lesson about humanity. As Amir reflects quietly on his transformative journey, he realizes something deeply profound. Sometimes it's not the loudest voices or the grandest gestures that change the world, but the quiet, everyday moments of kindness and connection. And this, perhaps, is the greatest lesson the Philippines has quietly taught him, and the thousands who followed. In the quiet strength of kindness lies the greatest power to transform lives.